Thank you very much indeed, Anishka, and I'm really delighted to be here. This is a very welcome coming together of two organisations, the IPU and ActionAid, which have somewhat different aims, but indeed there's a synergistic effect in the work that they do, strengthening parliamentary democracy and in particular looking at the rights of women, sustaining the rights of women. 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, we paid lip service to this idea that women obviously have rights in Afghanistan, but the job was to ensure that they knew that and that they were able to exercise those rights. And I think that in the intervening period, there have been an astonishing number. There has been an astonishing number of changes in that country, and much as we are pessimistic, I think there is also room for some optimism. And indeed, the reason why I think that is important is because the programs that are going to go ahead now with added incentive and energy are building upon a base that is already, albeit fragile, but it is already there. Look, what we've got in Afghanistan now is different. It is completely different from 10 or 11 or even 12 years ago. It is a country which actually knows what democracy is about. We may not have achieved it, but we know what it is about. We know that women have rights. We may not have achieved them, but we know that they do exist. We know that there are mechanisms that we ourselves could institute in order to gain those rights. Even if the Taliban, I mean, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but they're saying that even if the Taliban take over, which I think a lot of people feel they might, it will be a very, very different takeover. It will be a very different Afghanistan, because there will be people, women included in Afghanistan, who will actually say very loudly and very clearly no, and that will make it into a very different country from the one it was when all the good work began in 2001. So I'm inclined to be less pessimistic, or at least I'm optimistic that I can be less pessimistic about what is going on in that country, and I'm determined to maintain that attitude of a degree of optimism. And
I'd like us to take a moment to imagine the life of women in Afghanistan. It's a life where going out into the street is a risky business. Insecurity is the norm for everybody, but for women, the danger of bombings, shootings is compounded by the daily threat of sexual assault in the street. Where going to work can, on occasion, or going to school, can be running the gauntlet of assassination, poisonings, or arson. And where home, far from being a sanctuary, is likely to be a place of brutality and abuse. 87% of Afghan women report being victims of domestic violence at some time in their lives. Afghanistan could start to make progress with a relatively small sum of money. Our brand new research shows that for just $90 million over 5 years, we could make real progress on this issue. However, we found it shocking that on embarking on this research, we could find no evidence that such a costing had been undertaken officially in the government of Afghanistan. If we can secure this $90 million, it will enable shelters to stay open and more to be created, the training of women lawyers and paralegals, and increases in the number of female police, among other areas. And the issue is getting lost in the big picture conversations about security, economic growth, and development. Yet violence against women and girls is nothing less than the direst threat to these goals. For there can be no security while women live in fear of attack at home and in the street. There won't be successful growth without women's participation in the economy, and there'll be no success in development without women's contribution to health, education, and government. And we can't just leave it up to the Afghan government to decide and to act. We must have specific earmarked funds from the international community, and we must send a clear message about our expectations to the Afghan government.
As we move to a post-conflict, post-withdrawal situation of armed forces, it will be absolutely crucial that we have a sustainably progressive society, one that is moving forwards and not moving back. That is inseparable, particularly in the context of Afghanistan, from the role of women in that society. 27% of MPs are women, 25% of government jobs, 2 million girls in school. Every year that continues is starting to embed that, but it needs longer for it to be achieved. And we should not underestimate the gains. We should, however, equally not underestimate the difficulties. We should pay tribute not only to the British and Allied troops who have been securing many of those gains, but also those who've been working, sometimes some at considerable, even ultimate cost, in the NGOs in the area, and also a tribute to those Afghan women who've taken huge risks in many cases, particularly those who have been the pioneers in making progress. And we need to make sure that there is a greater degree of urgency at the Tokyo conference and in other international fora, that in these vital next 18 months secures those gains, which, as I say, is not just for the benefit of the women and others in Afghanistan, is actually a contribution to a more secure world more generally.
The fact that security and women's development go hand in hand, I think, is a very important point. And the other very important point is that the position of women in development policy has to be absolutely fundamental, not just in Afghanistan, in every part of the world that is seeking to advance. It is women and girl children especially who are, through their empowerment, going to effect change. And any development strategy that doesn't have the rights of women and the girl child at its core is destined to fail, not just the women, but the whole society.